In recent videos, we revisited some cool British singles released during the first half of 1966. Now, it's time to take a look at the second half of the year, which was also full of great and innovative 45s. July 1966 in particular, was probably not one of the greatest months of 1966 when it comes to singles. But there were still some great single releases and some interesting stories behind them. So, without further ado, let's begin.
I want to spend my life with a girl like you.
July 1966 saw the release of the Troggs' third single. With a Girl Like You was written by lead singer Reg Presley and recorded at Olympic Studios in London. The New Musical Express wrote,
"Another winner coming up for the Troggs. This doesn't have the novelty spoken passages and tempo breaks of Wild Thing, but it does have another gimmick at the end of each line. The soloist repeats the melody in a sort of scat vocal that everyone can join in. It's a catchy mid-tempo tune, fairly simple in construction, and therefore, quickly assimilated. I enjoyed it."
The B-side was very reminiscent of Wild Thing both structurally and melodically.
I want you. I said I want you.
Later in 1969, the MC5 recorded an excellent version of the song which was featured on their debut album Kick Out the Jam. At the time, the Troggs were constantly being criticized for being unprogressive. The back-to-basics approach of their music was seen as unhip, and many music fans and journalists from that era considered him a joke. But despite the criticism, the single became an even bigger success than the previous hit. The song reached number 1 in Britain, and it was also a top 5 hit in several European countries. In the States, the single stalled at number 21.
That's the Troggs at number 2 in this week's Top 40. Probably be number 1 next week. That or The Loving Spoonful, Summer in the City. With a Girl Like You from them, and the time is 24 minutes until 8 o'clock on the breakfast program. And now, God Only Knows, the Beach Boys. Number 26 on our fabulous 40. Knockout harmonies in this one. Listen carefully. 12 minutes until 8 o'clock on the Mike Lennox breakfast program on your first for fun station, Big L. Commercial radio at its best.
One of the most often discussed topics in the press throughout June and July 1966 was the Beach Boys' new album, Pet Sounds. In the States, the album was met with a lukewarm critical and commercial response. In Britain, however, the record got excellent reviews, and the British press hailed it as the most progressive pop album ever released. It was also a commercial success. The record reached number 2, and remained in the top 20 for 32 weeks. July 1966 saw a few British bands covering songs from the album and releasing them as singles. Tony Rivers and the Castaways were the first British band to cover a song from the album.
God only knows what I'd be without you. If you should ever...
Their version was obviously not a patch on the original, and the original version by the Beach Boys was released as a single the same week as the Castaways' 45. So their record was doomed from the start, and didn't mean a thing in the charts. The Factotums were another band who covered a song from Pet Sounds in July 1966. Here Today was actually covered by several British bands. The song was covered by groups such as The Art Movement, Rob Storm,
Now you think that she's perfection. This time it's really an exception.
and The Sefton.
No, you ought to take it slowly. No, you ought to get to know me.
And another British artist who covered a song from Pet Sounds in 1966 was a female singer called Peanut, who covered the song Waiting for the Day.
I gave you love with a brand new start. That's what you needed the most to set your broken heart free.
Obviously, none of these covers could hold a candle to the original versions, but they stand as a testament to the huge success and influence that the album had in Britain.
I'm waiting for the day when you can love me.
Sunshine came softly through my window today.
Oddly enough, one of the greatest singles by a British artist from July 1966 wasn't actually released in the UK until December of that year. Sunshine Superman was released in the States in July 1966. But due to a contractual dispute, the British release was delayed until December 1966. where it appeared on Donovan's previous label, Pi Records. Donovan actually recorded the song in December 1965, and it was originally scheduled to be released in January 1966. Sunshine Superman is already widely regarded as an early example of psychedelia, but it would probably be considered to be the first psychedelic single if it had been released in January 1966 as it was originally intended. The song featured future Led Zeppelin members Jimmy Page on guitar and John Paul Jones on bass. Many British DJs bought the single as an import, and by the time the single was released in Britain in December 1966, the song had already been played to death in clubs all over the UK. The single reached number 1 in the States, and it reached number 2 in the UK when it was released in December.
I would be a higher rater, and finally a big-time operator. Yeah.
Zoot Money and his band are mostly remembered for featuring future Police member Andy Summers on guitar. But the group enjoyed enormous popularity in clubs all over Britain. However, despite their popularity in clubs, chart success always seemed to elude them. The Melody Maker wrote,
Raver Money with a jumping up-tempo modern blues. His husky voice is a bit indistinguishable over the big roll band who are in a loud shouting swinging mood. Zoot's rendering of this Tony Colton Ray Smith composition is certainly commercial, maybe too much so for purist fans. But humorous lyrics and a big rhythm, plus some luck, could put it bang into the chart.
I took a job as an airline navigator. Yes, I did.
Big Time Operator became the band's most successful single, peaking at number 25. The group broke up in late 1966 and changed their name to Dan Tallien's Chariot. July 1966 was a tumultuous month for Manfred Mann. Earlier that month, lead singer Paul Jones announced that he was leaving the band to start a solo career. The Manfreds quickly announced that they would carry on with new lead singer Mike Dabo. But many fans and journalists were convinced that this was the end of the Manfreds as a successful group. In the end, Manfred Mann proved both fans and journalists wrong, and they scored several hits with the new incarnation of the band, while on the other hand, Paul Jones never really managed to take off as a solo act. Their first single with Mike Dabo was a cover of Just Like a Woman by Bob Dylan. Record Mirror wrote,
Nothing to stop this being a gigantic hit. New boy Dabo fits in perfectly on this cleverly worded Dylan song. The backing sounds like some earlier Dylan. Fine-tempered arrangement with clever group vocal behind the lead.
The single reached number 10 in Britain.
Just like a little girl. So
Sorrow became a major hit for the Merseys in early 1966. The band was managed and produced by Kit Lambert, who also managed The Who, and their second single was this Pete Townshend composition. Townshend and Company eventually recorded their own version of the song later in 1966, but according to Lambert, the song was specifically written for the Merseys. The single got excellent reviews in the press, but it failed to replicate the success of their previous single. Disc magazine journalist Penny Valentine wrote,
A Pete Townshend song of much simplicity about lost love. It has been given a superbly imaginative treatment. The entire orchestra sounds as though it has been gathered to lend a hand, but in the most fresh and gentle way. One part in the middle meanders a bit, but the Hungarian beginning will have everyone singing it as they did on the long blonde hair bit of their last single. It will be a huge hit, and the fantastic end needs special mention.
Despite Penny Valentine's enthusiastic review and despite the huge success of their previous 45, the single failed to chart.
There's no use in even trying. You're refusing to understand me, baby. It's aggravation.
Chris Curtis was the Searchers' drummer from 1960 till mid-1966. But he wasn't just the drummer in the band. Curtis was an essential part of the Searchers' sound, and he contributed to the band's characteristic vocal harmonies with his distinctive voice. In addition to that, he also wrote most of the band's original songs. but Curtis also suffered from severe mental health problems. The Beatles, who played with the Searchers at the Cavern on many occasions, referred to him as Mad Henry. Curtis was also gay, at a time when homosexuality was still illegal in Britain, and this only helped increase his paranoia. Curtis left the Searchers in mid-1966 after an extensive Australian tour with the Rolling Stones. Accounts of the breakup differ, but there were some significant incidents during the tour and Curtis had become unreliable. Curtis hated Australia, and he was abusing a variety of substances to the point where he fell off the stage at one venue. The drummer came back to the recording scene in July 1966 with this single called Aggravation.
Baby, it's aggravation. Whoa, baby.
The song, which was written by Joe South, featured a stunning lineup of musicians. It featured Jimmy Page and Joe Moretti on guitar, John Paul Jones on bass, and Bobby Graham on drums. The single got some decent reviews in the press, and it got a fair amount of airplay on pirate radio stations, but it failed to reach the charts. Later in 1968, Curtis played a major role in the formation of Deep Purple. Curtis originated the concept behind Deep Purple, and formed the band in its original incarnation of Roundabout.
How can they spend $1 million on a rocket head when there's millions on Earth in need of bread?
It's hard to believe it, but they do.
Glenda Collins released several commercially unsuccessful singles produced by genius producer Joe Meek. But despite her lack of success, her singles have become cult favorites among fans of the producer, and those of you who are interested in her career should definitely check out this box set that Cherry Red Records released just a few months ago. It's Hard to Believe It was written by Joe Meek himself, and it's one of the greatest sides Glenda Collins ever released.
With my plea for all I'm worth, let's first make this a better Earth.
The song was a mixture of political lyrics and science fiction effects.
Really believe it, yeah, 'cause it's true.
High Records feared that the lyrics were too over-political, and they also objected to the science fiction elements that were featured in the song. As a result, Meek had problems getting the single released. But this is 60s pop at its best and should have been a massive hit. The single, however, was barely reviewed in the press, and the few reviews that were published weren't very enthusiastic. By 1966, Joe Meek's productions were deemed outdated, and the song didn't get much airplay. Meek died in February 1967, and this became the last single Glenda Collins ever released.
It's hard to believe it, but they do.
Spend one third of your life in bed.
Those of you who collect compilations of obscure singles from the 60s are probably familiar with this song.
1/3 of your life.
This tune has been comped many times over the years, and it's yet another example of a B-side that was way better than the A-side. The majority were formed in Hull in 1964, and they released 8 singles between 1965 and 1968. This is by far one of their greatest sides, and its appearance on several compilations has turned this 45 into a really valuable collector's item. An original copy of the single was recently sold on eBay for over £300. The single, however, didn't chart. As previously stated, July wasn't the greatest month of 1966 when it comes to singles. And even bands who usually release quality material seemed to be going through a period dominated by lack of ideas. The Pretty Things had released several great singles in the mid-60s, but their lack of success prompted their label to pressure them to record a cover of this Ray Davies composition.
He's got a house in the country where he likes to spend his weekend days. Oh yeah! Oh yeah!
It wasn't a bad cover, but it sounded like the band was going through the motions, and it certainly wasn't as good as the original version by the Kinks. The B-side was much better, and it was also more akin to the sort of sound that the Pretty Things favored during that period.
I'm needing you. Little girl, I'm needing you. Yeah, I'm needing you.
Similarly, The Action are a much beloved band among fans of mod groups from the 60s. And along with Steve Marriott, lead singer Reg King had one of the greatest soulful voices in Britain. but their single release from July 1966 was definitely not one of their best singles. Baby You've Got It was a cover of the Soul Number by the Radiants, and the B-side was a cover of Since I Lost My Baby by the Temptations.
Since I lost my baby. Since I lost my baby. Oh, since I lost my baby.
The single got mixed reviews in the press and it sank without a trace. I hope you enjoyed this trip back to July 1966. Stay tuned for next month's episode about August 1966, which was a truly excellent month for singles. See you next time.